Dude, we're on. Thank goodness we made it.
I
Freaking
am
awesome.
too old for this techno crap.
Same. Same. I need a PA to organize this shit for me.
I need to get my kid here. That's the problem. Here, you're young
Yeah,
and
you
smart, child. Come and help me out.
absolutely.
All right, there
How
we
old
go.
is?
Hi.
Hey mate, how are you?
Yeah, not having a great day, but that's all right. Still here, still kicking.
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining me, dude. I'm super stoked to be here, to be honest, because this is the first time I've had a live chat with one of our um, Be Here Now family, our Accessing Inner Peace family. So I'm super stoked.
I'm super nervous, actually,
Same, same.
because I don't usually do podcasts. Like I've never done anything like this before, so it's a little weird.
Yeah, I've only done maybe four of them, and it
You're
gets
four ahead of me.
yeah, it gets easier, dude. It gets easier, but not that much easier.
Great, that's good to know.
So, just for folks watching either live or if they're watching this in the future, Wes is a lovely chap I've got to know through the Accessing Inner Peace group, which is the group that's associated with the Be Here Now page, which you'll be watching this on. I'll also share this with the group. Wes is from Ontario, Canada, and is an artist, transmasculine artist. Has a child who is how old, Wes?
He's 13.
He's 13, so that's 12 years ahead of me, buddy. I've got a 1 year old. Um,
That's what I'm
and
saying. It gets easier. I remember where you are. You can do this.
I'm gonna wear on your shoulder, mate, for sure. I'll be resting on that shoulder. Anyway, we got Wes on this morning because he sounds like a phenomenally interesting dude. He's a very caring individual, and he's got a fantastic story to share as well, of a journey, a mental health journey, which in some respects is similar to mine, and in others totally and utterly different. So Wes, mate, firstly, you've had a bit of a rough day, you say. What's going on?
Yeah, yeah. I think I actually just flew in a little while ago. I think I'm dealing with some loneliness.
Right,
I didn't sleep well last night, and then ended up going back to bed, and I slept a ridiculous amount of the day away.
right.
And then when I got up again, I was like, I just had this kind of, it's this uneasy feeling. It's, my stomach's not right. My shoulders are kind of trying to climb up into my ears here. And I couldn't really figure out what was kind of triggering it because there really wasn't anything going on. And then made myself a cup of tea and grabbed something to eat. And as I was doing that, I realized, wait a minute, I think I need a hug. And that kind of led to, right, okay, I'm lonely. That's what's going on.
Gotcha. Well, at least you're aware of it, right? And you know it. You can identify and label it and
It's a
deal with
lot
it.
of work to get there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me about your background. Was like, where did you grow up? Where are you from
Oh,
originally?
okay. Well, I actually grew up so I was born in a little tiny town in northern Ontario called Timmins. And then I came down to southern Ontario as a child. I was adopted. So I grew up about 45 minutes northwest of Toronto in a little town called Fergus. And I pretty much spent my whole life there. As a teenager, I think I left home at 16, and I was in Toronto by the time I was 18. I was homeless. Then I bounced out to British Columbia for a couple of years, had some homelessness and some really awful, awful crap happening out there. When the house burnt down, I said, okay, fine, I get it. I'm to go back to Ontario. So I came back to Ontario, and it's been a rough go. Like I've worked a little bit. I've spent most of my life not working. Unfortunately, as I got older, I started realizing something is actually wrong. Like it's not just me being, a whiny teenager or, acting out. Something's actually wrong. And so that probably started a good, probably 10 or 15 year sort of grind with the medical system to try and figure out what's actually wrong with me, right?
So,
Because
sorry,
I'm
at
pretty
what point?
sure life doesn't suck like this.
Oh, sorry, what age was that you make have this realization?
I was probably in about my early 30s. Actually, it was probably just after Ethan was born.
Right.
So yeah, it was in my early 30s because I had sobered up. So I had struggled with alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
I had sobered up when I had Ethan, and I started realizing, wait a minute, there's more to this, right? There's not just this surface stuff. There's got to be something driving it. And getting sober was sort of the first chance I had to start peeling back some of the layers and realize, yeah, there is actually something going on. And then, like I said, I started going to my doctor and saying, like, listen, this is my brain's not working right, right? I don't know why it's not, but it's not working right, and we got to fix it. And then I think almost, sorry, almost 3 years ago now, I think I got the PTSD diagnosis, which kind of was really able to bring in those things that I was still struggling with that the other diagnoses just didn't sort of touch. And so I got that, and that was immensely helpful. I mean, it was an awful diagnosis to get, but it gave me so much, such a better framework to look at my behavior and go, okay, so if I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who's experienced trauma and hasn't properly processed it, these behaviors that I keep running into make a hell of a lot more sense.
Absolutely. And just to back it up slightly, what
Sure.
behaviors were there that you were recognizing weren't normal, if you can call anything normal, and that
Yeah,
were
yeah.
causing you,
We're typical.
dissonance? Yeah.
Um, the hypervigilance is a big one. I I startle at loud noises. I'm really, really uncomfortable with people behind my back, like paranoid uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Even when I'm walking on the sidewalk, if I think there's somebody behind me, I'll just kind of slow myself down and let them go past because I just no. Um, there's a healthy dose of paranoia. Rational brain says nobody's really out to get you, but the
Yeah.
paranoid's like, yeah, that's just because we haven't figured it out how to prove it yet. So there's been a lot of that, and then flashbacks. I have
Right.
been sexually assaulted a few times,
Right.
and just these intrusive thoughts that I couldn't get rid of, right?
And the,
And they'd be triggered by the weirdest, smallest things.
and these were experiences you had when you were in your 20s or in your teens, or
In my teens, I was
right.
I think I was 13 the first time I was assaulted. I
Crikey.
had been, yeah, I unfortunately I came to this realization actually just a couple of months ago that the my first two major relationships were both abusive. Um, the first one was
Sorry.
flat out abusive, and then the second one, he was actually a
Thanks.
pedophile who had groomed and recruited me,
Right.
basically. So
Crikey.
yeah, yeah, it was a lot. I grew up
It's pretty
really
hectic.
fast.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
just going to move Wes because the meeting room is taken up.
No, that's fine.
In fact, let me move somewhere that's a little bit more private. Hang on. Just in the
We're going
office.
on a journey. That's what we're
We
doing.
are going on a journey. We're at work. We're going to go outside. And I'm going to find a spot over here. Right, here we go. That's better. I'm cool. I'm feeling cooler as well. It's too hot in that office. Right, sorry, mate. So you had these experiences as a teenager, which is, well, at
Mhm.
any age, it's pretty horrific. And then that followed, and then after that, in your 20s, you said you were experiencing some homelessness and some you weren't working for whatever reason.
Yeah. Mostly because when I guess, well, again, now looking back, what I really struggle with is anxiety. Like that's probably my biggest symptom is, I'll go to the front door, I'll get ready, get myself dressed and get ready, and I'll go to the door and no, I just can't. Right? And if somebody says, "Well, why?" Because I just can't. I just can't bring myself to get out of that bloody front door and get things done.
Right,
Um, and it's been a real challenge. Like it's been not fun.
right. No, I hear you. Um, you then had your child. There was a number of years when obviously you're still realizing this. You're not comfortable in your own skin, and then you had this
Hmm.
PTSD diagnosis. You said 3 years ago.
Yeah, around about 3 years ago. Yeah, I what had happened is so I have a heart condition and I had been hospitalized for treatment for that. It was somewhat routine. It wasn't super unexpected. But something in that hospitalization just triggered a massive mental breakdown, actually, is what I had. Like I lost it. I was hiding under the covers. I thought I had hit the doctor. I probably spent hours just in these awful, awful flashbacks, and I was acutely non-functional. Like I couldn't even speak. until they finally passed. And I think I actually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later. And I had asked the doctor before that, was there any chance that I could maybe see a psychiatrist? Because, this is ridiculous. And so this was in Kitchener Hospital. They ended up transferring me to Toronto, where I got to see a psychiatrist down there. And after talking to me for about an hour and a half, I looked at her and I said, I'm just curious, is there, even a little bit of a possibility that I might be dealing with like some post-traumatic stress stuff? And to her credit, she didn't laugh at me. I was so proud of her. Because she just looked at me and she said, "You have hit every clinical marker." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay then. Okay, yay, I think." Because I wasn't super surprised, but I didn't realize it had been as bad as it was, right? Because that was my normal. So having somebody say, "Yeah, no, these things that you do aren't done by most people," was a bit of a wake-up call.
And I guess almost a relief as well, right? It's like, okay,
it was a huge relief.
Like a massive
relief. I could say, I'm not crazy. I really am crazy. There really is something going wrong. I'm not just making this up.
Dude, I had to laugh. That was a goal. I'm not crazy because I really am crazy.
I really am crazy. My mother had me tested. I had me tested.
Oh, dude, that's amazing. So that is such a relief. And then so from that point on, what do you do what did they prescribe? What did they, and I'm not talking about medication, I'm talking about, lifestyle, everything to help you.
That's where it gets not a whole lot better, unfortunately. Because of my heart condition, there's a whole bunch of psychiatric meds I can't even take.
Right.
And the ones that we did try, they worked for a little bit, and then my body wised up and said, "Oh, no. We're not going to do this anymore. We're done working." And I'd be right back to square one. So we went through a whole bunch of stuff and realized nothing was actually able to do that. So what I ended up doing was I looked into cannabis, which is legal in Canada.
Yeah.
At that time, it was only legal for medical patients. So I actually went that route and talked to a doctor and got a prescription. But the other thing that I did was I started reading books. So just slightly unrelated here, my son is on the spectrum. He's on the autistic spectrum. And so when we got that diagnosis, I'm on social assistance. I'm on welfare. I can't afford to take him to therapy. I can't afford all of the supports that he would need. So I hit the internet. I hit the library, and I teach myself. And so that's pretty much what I did with this. Once I realized what I was dealing with, all right, let's hit the interwebs. Let's start cruising. Let's go to Harvard. Let's go to PubMed. Let's get my hands on all the research that I can possibly find, ingest, and understand, and start trying to figure out what can I change and what do I have to learn to live with, right? And where's that balance between, huge amounts of change, or do I just need to tweak this a little bit so that I can be a bit more functional?
And so what did you discover? What were some of the strategies that you researched and found out about that actually worked for you?
Well, I think that the biggest thing was looking at the science of it. So whenever I'm having a flashback or whenever I'm triggered, right, it's that whole bio-neurochemical cascade where, the amygdala gets set off and it sends off danger signals, and then your adrenaline gets going, and just there's this whole cascade effect. So realizing, okay, this cascade effect causes me to feel these sets of symptoms. So if I start feeling this, I now have the capacity to pause and go, am I actually under threat, or has something gotten kicked off and is just like a runaway freight train? And usually it's the runaway freight train, which gives me the chance to go, okay, let's go somewhere where I feel more safer. Can I remove myself from the situation? Do I just need to step outside for a couple of minutes? When's the last time I had my medication, right? Am I in a situation that I'm not comfortable in? And just being able to look at that and then start assessing and go, here's what I can do, right? Like if I'm outside, well, maybe I'll just come inside. If I'm around a whole bunch of people, you know what, folks, I love you all, but I'm starting to hit a wall, so I need to go inside, right? The biggest thing is I think I've stopped, more or less, tried to stop feeling ashamed of it, right?
Absolutely.
My brain is broken. There's not a whole lot I can do about it right now. If my leg was broken, it would be in a cast and everybody would be fawning over me. Just because you can't see it's broken doesn't mean I'm not going to stand up and say, listen, it's broken and I need to go.
Absolutely. 100%, dude. And those, I mean, those very simple strategies you're employing, which is essentially, becoming aware of small signs within your body, within your brain, that things may start to cascade now.
Yeah.
That point of awareness is a powerful thing for people to try and cultivate, and for you to have. And, a lot of people don't have that. People don't have that awareness. They get tied up in the
Oh,
thoughts.
absolutely.
So for you to be able to just take that time to take a step back from just observe stuff, observe the feelings you're having, the thoughts you're having, and be able to remove yourself from it. I mean, that's key, right? It's a really simple key as well.
It's simple, but it's so hard to do.
In the
And
moment.
that was one of the biggest, that was the one of the biggest things that I struggled with, was being able to get that half second of breath to go, wait a second, what's actually going on? And I started doing that by bringing awareness when I wasn't having a moment. When I was just sitting watching TV and enjoying life with my kid, I would just take a moment and breathe and say, okay, how do I feel? And it's funny because, you go through a lot of breathing exercise in the group, and it's hysterical because you go, breathing exercises will set me off every single time. As soon as I start paying attention to my breath, I'm going to have an anxiety reaction in about 30 seconds.
Really?
It's hysterical. It's ridiculous. So what I ended up doing was okay, I clearly can't focus on my breath, but I can touch things, right?
Absolutely. Right.
I can
Different
go,
sense.
all right, so I can't breathe, but, I have this thing, so I'm going to hold it, and I want to really feel, what does the plastic feel like? And I would spend time doing just something like this, because it meant that I had to focus, right? But it wasn't the breathing which was going to set things off. I was just like, I need another sense that I can focus with.
And that's really interesting, because that's not something that that's a lot. I do think about different senses, but my go-to is my breathing. For example, I think I gave an example yesterday. I was in a conference last week, and I got pulled up in front of a presenter, and I'm shit at being in front of lots of people. I have anxiety just thinking about it, right? And
Right.
I almost started hyperventilating. But my go-to place is breathing and just literally feeling the cold air through my nostrils,
Right.
pausing, just being super mindful, and then blowing it out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and
you can use
that sets me
any
off every
sense, right?
time.
Right. But what you're saying is
Yeah,
you can use any sense. Like you say, you can pick up a
absolutely.
pen and just feel the pen.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel step outside, feel the wind across your cheeks. You can
Yeah.
listen to some music. All it is.
I'm 43 and I still have a blankie, because when I'm
Great.
feeling really stressed, that tactile feedback is what
Was he still there?
like the look of it, and then suddenly I'm not panicking anymore. Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. No, I just lost you for half a minute.
Oh,
That's okay.
okay. Where did you lose me? I was explaining how much I love my blankie.
Start again, yeah. So you have your blanket at the age of 43, which I'm going to
Yeah,
now invest in the blanket.
absolutely. My blankie, it's what it actually is it's this just enormous shawl, and it's
Right.
wool. I knit and I crochet, so I really like the feel of wool. So when I'm really stressed, I'll go grab it and I'll wrap up in it, and I'll start doing this. Like, I'll be like, okay, there we go, and that tactile feedback, and it smells right. Like, I've
Yeah.
got cologne and it kind of smells nice, and so that kind of sensory feedback will allow me to just pull myself out of that cycle and go, okay, just okay, all right, there we go. Let's go find the tassels. Now we're going to play with the tassels for a little bit. We're going to comb them out, and then I'm not panicking. Sometimes I only need to do it for a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's I'm going home and I'm going to wrap up in my blanket for the rest of the night. Bye bye.
Dude, that's so powerful. It's so simple, but so powerful. And I'm guessing, a lot of people don't. I mean, it's just simple mindfulness practice, right? That's all it is.
It's all my son's fault, you understand. Um,
Right.
because he's on the spectrum, he also has sensory processing disorder, so I had to spend a lot of time learning about how to process sensory information. Well, when I was learning it for him, I went, hey, wait a minute. That might work for me too. I got
Totally.
nothing to lose. Let's try it. And it's like, yes. So all of this healing, it's all his fault.
So there's always a reason for things, right, happening. So the reason, I'm a
Absolutely.
big believer in that
Absolutely.
sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So how are you right now? Like in terms of your, your general day to day, you have you have tools that you use to manage your, anxiety
Yeah.
and
Well, as I was trying to figure out sort of what was going on because I'm having a bad day, I was reflecting that, even 6 months ago, a bad day for me would be panic, like just wave and wave of anxiety attack and, all sorts of intrusive and parasuicidal thoughts. And now today, a bad day is, oh, I just really want to hug and I don't want to talk to anyone and I'm feeling really twitchy. And it was just amazing that I can see that bottom has slowly come up, which is great. I mean,
it's
it's really,
amazing,
really
dude.
great. Oh my God, it's so amazing. And it's nice because it's summertime here. So I now have usually the capacity to go out and talk to people, right? I do photography as well. And I've been getting out every day with my camera and just putting up pictures because I can do that now. I can actually plan in advance. I'm starting to get some of my executive functioning back, which is huge,
Yeah.
right? Because trying to parent when I can't necessarily remember what the hell groceries I'm supposed to get or what was I supposed to do today has been really challenging.
So this word executive functioning, you mentioned it to me yesterday when you were offering me advice. What,
Yes.
can you explain a little bit what that is? Because I'm
Oh,
not that
okay.
smart.
Oh, yeah, you are that smart. So executive functioning is the capacity to order tasks.
Right.
So when you decide that you're going to go to work in the morning, you
Yeah.
know in your head, so to go to work, I have to get up and I have to get dressed and I have to, whatever you do to get yourself out the door. The capacity to keep that all organized in your head is executive functioning.
Right.
Now, where I learned about this again with my son Ethan, he didn't have that capacity. It was much weaker in him when he was little. So we had to look at other resources to externalize that process for him while his brain figured out how to make it work for him. Um, and so that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, right? When they say, "Well, I've been depressed and I can't get my housework done." A lot of people don't say, "Well, are you struggling with things like are you struggling with putting things into steps?" If I told you to get ready to go out, are you able to break down what you need to do? No? Okay, that's an executive functioning issue. There's ways we can work with that, right? There's tools and there's ideas. Like I use an app called Habitica because I'm a gamer. And so what it does is it gamifies a lot of the daily habits that I should be doing, right? I have a little thing that says morning routine, and it is, make your bed, take your medication, go brush your teeth, go feed the cats, go get dressed. Those are the first 5 things I need to do in the morning. And let me tell you, even on good mornings, I have trouble doing that regardless. So this is nice because I mean, like, check, 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 and then I get a bonus because I'm a gamer. So I'm like, woo, I leveled up.
What was the name of the app again? That sounds really useful.
Habitica. I can
Habitica.
actually post a link in the
Awesome.
group
Yeah,
when we're done.
let's share that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot of fun.
and tell me about the speaking you do.
All the speaking I do is actually related to my being transgender.
Right.
So really what I do is I go around, I have a professor that brings me into her, I think it's a 4th year psych class. I do trainings for the city of Kitchener for their youth stuff. I have a couple of, what the hell is it? Canadian Mental Health Association, which is sort of our local mental health organization. They have some groups and I do trainings with them as well. And basically what I do, I go into schools, anyone will have me really, and I just talk about my experiences around my transition, what it was like beforehand, what it was like afterwards. Depending on the group, like I talked to a group of 2nd-year medical students a couple of years ago, and so I was talking in that case about how they can structure their clinical practice to be more um, welcoming of transgender and gender variant people, right? Like asking them, so here's how you can ask about these things that might be less triggering to somebody who's been dealing with issues around gender.
Right.
And I've probably been doing that for about, well, almost 10 years now, actually.
Wow. And you don't have any anxiety around that? Like having, yeah, that's
None. It's
amazing.
hysterical. I've been doing public speaking since I was 5. I think
That's
was
the
my first
exact
television
opposite of me,
interview.
Wes.
Yeah. When you were like, I was pulled up in front of the speakers, suddenly I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. I would volunteer. They wouldn't have to drag me. I'd be like, no, take me. I can do it.
Well, I think dude, I think it's super helpful. It's an amazing thing you're doing, that sharing that information and sharing your experience.
It's really great because it's something, especially with everything that's going down on in the US, right? A lot of folks don't realize they're necessarily talking to someone who's trans and they have questions. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about the language. If you're honestly trying to learn, let's just have a conversation and we'll get things sorted out. So
Can we have a
it's been a
conversation?
lot of
Because
fun.
I've never had a conversation about that with anyone.
We can absolutely have a conversation. So it's funny because I tell people, even during my presentations, I have 3 rules. Usually, when we're in a group, I said rule number 1 is my story you can share with anyone. Anyone else who reveals something, it needs to stay here. The second rule is don't worry about language. If you don't think you have the right word, I'm not that worried. We'll figure it out. I don't offend very easily at all. And the third one, and the most important one, is really think through your question because I'm going to answer you. I've been doing this for 10 years. I have yet to turn around and say, no, I don't think I'm going to answer that. I have said, are you sure you want me to answer that? That's like your only warning. But yeah, because I figure it this way, if they are genuinely curious, if you're brave enough to ask a question, there's going to be somebody else in that audience who wants the same information who doesn't have the stones to ask.
Okay, well, I'm generally curious, so I'm going to ask Wes if that's cool with you, Wes.
Absolutely.
So, at what point did you realize that you maybe wanted to be the other sex?
Um, so strangely enough, I didn't have, I think I always knew, but I didn't get the language for it until I moved to Toronto in my 20s. I grew up in small town Ontario. We didn't talk about things like that. Sure, there were probably gay people, but the way I was raised is unless they're hurting somebody, it's really none of our business, right? You just leave people be as long as they're good people. Who cares? So we didn't have these kind of conversations in my house. And when I went to Toronto and I met other women who were more like me, and I went, oh, there's people like me, and they called themselves lesbians. And I was like, okay, except I don't want to sleep with other women. So I very quickly kind of divorced the behaviors from the sexual attraction, right? So that should have been my first clue that maybe I wasn't a lesbian. But so first I identified as bisexual, then
Yeah.
I identified as a lesbian, and then I started realizing, again, I don't really want to sleep with women, so that doesn't work. But I was in an open relationship with my partner at the time, and I had a girlfriend from the States who was trans. And so I sat down, and I'm not known for my tact when I'm asking questions. I said, how'd you figure it out? How did you put together that you were born a guy and then didn't want to be one? Like, how do you figure that out? And so she started telling me her story, and it was a bit worrisome because I started hearing what I thought were my own private thoughts coming out of somebody else's mouth. And I was like, oh yeah, oh okay, that's great to know. And it set off a little bit of that cognitive dissonance, and then it stuck. And on a trip to Montreal in 2009, where I got to present myself as Wes for 4 whole days straight, that was delightful. And then I came back and I went, I can't be a wife and a mom anymore, and this is a problem. Um, and so
Absolutely.
I was married at the time, so I told my husband, and he was a bit surprised. I don't blame him, but we separated. Obviously, we're great friends now. I told my son when he was 3. His entire reaction was the first time I cut my hair, he looked at me and said, "But mummies can't have short hair." And so I explained. So I explained that my mom and a couple of my friends who were all parents and all moms, they all had short hair, and he's like, "Oh, okay." And that was pretty much it. That was his entire trauma around my transition. Yeah. So I mean, in that respect, I've had a fantastic experience. It's been pretty smooth. I've been well supported. I was old enough because I was 33. Actually, I was 33 when I started my transition. So I was able to say, at least in my head, if my parents don't accept me for who I am, that's fine. I'm not dependent on them anyways.
Yeah.
Um, they
And so,
did,
how were they? How are they with it? Or how have they
Um,
been?
I think if I cornered my mom, I think she might still say it's a bit of a phase. Um,
Even
but
with the beard.
that's, well, right. It's just a phase. Maybe next month it'll go, and I'll just suddenly wake up and go, I was so wrong. Um, But no, I mean, by and large, she struggles with the name, but we've got 3 kids in the family. She's never gotten my name right. So that none of this is new, right? I was like, I have not been called my own name consistently since I was a kid, so I'm not surprised.
You cracked
But
me
there
up,
was
man.
one day in particular, she just kept screwing up and using the wrong pronouns and the wrong name. And I finally looked at her and I said, all right, listen, Mom, you had 36 years with Lisa, which was my name prior to transition, with Lisa and she and female pronouns. I said, I'm going to give you 36 years to get used to Wes and he, but year 37, that's it. That's where my patience runs out.
No, you
Because
got to.
she's trying, right? And I'm like, you're making an effort. You're not doing it to be a jerk. You're not trying to dismiss me. You're literally trying to get your brain to do the right thing. Don't sweat
So you got an amazing sense of humor.
it. It's a coping mechanism. It is absolutely, it's a survival tool. I tell people if I stop cracking jokes, then you actually need to worry. Because as long as I can crack a joke, I'm gonna be okay.
And so, how long did your transition take? How long does it normally take?
Well, again, depending on what you call the end of transition,
Right.
I was probably so my social transition took like a couple of months. Basically, I ran an experiment, said, oh, I should have been a guy, threw out all my clothes, and there we go. The medical transition took a little bit longer. I think that took about 2 years. I started on testosterone, and again, because of my heart condition, I had to start at a really, really tiny
Yeah.
dose, and it took forever to get me up to a normal dose. So it was a bit longer in that respect. I wanted to go and have some surgery, but my health isn't going to allow it. So unfortunately, from the medical perspective, my transition's done. So I'd say that I would have considered myself post-transition probably about 8 years now. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, around about 8. Yeah, I'm 8 years old. It's great. And they let me have a kid. What's wrong with them?
No, I think it's an amazing story.
It's an
Amazing
interesting
story.
story. I will say that.
Well, dude, I don't want to keep you too long. That's been a really
No
interesting
problem.
conversation.
Well,
Unless
you
you have
know
any.
where to find me, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for those who are listening or watching, either live or later on, Wes, you've volunteered to be a mentor, right, in the Accessing Inner
I
Peace
have.
group. So
Yep.
if there are folks out there who have questions about any of what we've just been discussing, then reach out to Wes, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer you.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even need to be limited to, I'm having some mental health issues, right? If you have questions about that or about anything I talked about at the transition, just reach out, man. Just ask me. If you're honestly curious, I'm happy to field questions anytime.
You're awesome, Wes. Thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much for the opportunity.
And we'll chat soon, mate, no doubt.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye,
Take
dude.
care.
Lots of love.
Cheers.
See you, bud. Bye.